Okay, a question that I get from a ton of you is, where do I start if I want to start a podcast? And I love when answers are simpler than we expect them to be. So I want to tell you about a resource that's changed the game for us with our podcast, and that is Spotify for Podcasters. If you want to start your own podcast, Spotify has a platform that makes it so easy. You upload your episodes and then Spotify actually distributes it everywhere onto all platforms and even helps you earn money so that it can be profitable for you and a blessing for you, your family, your people. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit your podcast literally from your phone or your computer. So if you don't have a fancy setup, it's okay. You can immediately get started today. Then again, you distribute it to Spotify and everywhere else that podcasts are available. You can also do video podcasts, which sounds like a dream to me. And when you want to take conversations with your people to the next level, you can do Q&A and polls, all sorts of fun things. You can earn money with ads and podcast subscriptions, or you can just get started using what you've got for the good of others and the glory of God. Check out Spotify for Podcasters. I use it. I love it. I highly recommend it. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app. I have it on my phone, highly suggest, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Hey friends, you're listening to the Go and Tell Gals podcast, and I'm your host, Jess Conlon. In most of our episodes, we'll have a guest, a woman who is running on mission right where she's at. We pray this podcast leaves you encouraged and spurred on to go and tell the good news. Hello friends, today's podcast episode is an interview with my friend Lindsey Nobles. If you have been impacted by any kind of woman in the current realm of Christian publishing or teaching, I think you'll find that you have been influenced by someone who has been influenced by Lindsey. She is a leader of leaders, and she's been working in all different kind of realms for the last dozen or so years. She is wise, she is generous, she is kind, and you are going to love this interview with my friend Lindsey, who is such a great leader. Gals, we're in for a treat today. We have Lindsey Nobles, who is such a woman of mission, such a woman of purpose, and I just want to say thanks so much. Number one, it's early. You're up early.
I'm up a little early. Well, I guess I'm always up early, but I guess I'm not trying to formulate sentences well early very often.
Right. Yeah. It's 8 a.m. is not mind-blowingly early, but to say things, to say real words.
Yes. Yeah. To say things that are being recorded can be frightening.
Okay. Hey, catch everybody up. Take as long as you need to. You have done a lot of things. I feel like the first time not the first time, but when I saw you last, I remember saying Lindsey, you've done a lot of stuff. You've done a lot of stuff the last 10, 15 years. Tell everybody where you've been, what you've been up to.
I think I usually feel 28, in my soul.
Yes.
That would be the age that I still sometimes feel. And then when I recount all the different moves I've made over my life and the different jobs I've had, I feel every ounce of 42, which is how old I am. I grew up in Dallas. For college, I moved to Colorado, went to University of Colorado in Boulder. And then after college, I was back in Dallas for a little bit. And then I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and kind of started working in events. I worked for this big music festival. It was so fun. And then worked for Books A Million, which is a large retail book chain. And I worked there for about 5 years, started in events. It was so fun. I would do all their big corporate autographings. They would have Jane Fonda come in, or John McCain, or Paula Deen was huge at the time. And so I'd get to kind of travel and help facilitate some of those events, which was really fun. But then they moved me into buying. And so I was a buyer for a while there. And then I moved back into marketing. And from being at Books A Million, I had a lot of relationships in publishing. I guess in like 2007, probably, I moved up to Nashville and started working at Thomas Nelson. I did corporate communications for Nelson, and I did that for 4 years. And then I left, and I really felt like I wanted to work in the social justice space. And so I started working for a social entrepreneurship called Project 7 that was out in California. And I did that for like a year, and I really missed Nashville. And so I moved back and worked for Food for the Hungry for a few years. When I was in Nashville working for Nelson, I had met Jenny Allen, and we started dreaming together about the If Gathering and having conversations about that. So that had been happening behind the scenes for years. We had been working on that together. And then Food for the Hungry was a part of the original sort of launch of If Gathering. They were our first big sponsor when I was working for them. And then after If was sort of becoming a thing, I realized I was needed there. And so I moved there and worked with them for 3 years as their COO in Austin. And then I guess like a year and a half ago, I realized it was time for me to do something different. And so I resigned from If and kind of went on this journey trying to figure out what was next. And I landed at a place called Onsite. I moved back to Nashville, work at Onsite. We do personal growth and therapeutic workshops. And then we have a residential trauma treatment center. And so it's been so fun learning sort of a whole new space and language. And I think that mental health is so important. And so I have loved learning about the effects of trauma on all of us. And it's been great.
So here's what I'm like taking away from that, which I know a little bit about Onsite, and I want you to share more. But when I hear all that, there are two things that I hear. Number one, Onsite feels like a big deep breath. That's a lot of like, I hate the word hustle because it gets such like a bad, it has bad connotations, but that's a lot of like pumping and running. Does this feel like a change of pace where you're at now?
I think I always gravitate towards catalytic people and want to be a part. Like, I really care about life change.
Yeah.
It does feel like a deep breath in the sense of part of leaving If was like needing to step out of ministry. I think that like when your faith and your friendships and your community, like, and your church and kind of all those things are so tangled up together that sometimes, at least I needed to go through the process of kind of untangling to understand what was what in my life.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the ability to still be a part of major life change for people and to find a place where I could pursue that and feel the purpose that I need to motivate me in a job, I feel so grateful for that. And I think that what I've seen for me, that it's just given me a lot more freedom and energy to bring out the fullness of my faith. Like, I think that I thought that sort of stepping out, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
I'm
I might just
really thinking where we're going. Yeah.
Okay. I think that for a long time, I think a lot of us probably believe this lie that we have to be like working, like our work, what we get paid for has to be in pursuit of God. And I think that everyone's work is in pursuit of God. And so for me, I actually felt really constrained to not be able to continue to grow and evolve and explore my faith the way that I needed to when I was sort of working in that space. I just feel a new freedom working outside of that space to be able to pursue God and talk about God and use all the language I want. And, there's more room for the evolution of and growing of my faith.
Yeah. Okay. I love all of this. First of all, what's your Enneagram number?
It took me forever to figure it out. I am a 3 with a 4 wing.
Okay.
I really did not identify with threes at all. And the thing that I realized is that I'm the self-preservation three, which is the counter type.
Yeah.
And so instead of like pursuing fame or popularity, I am more pursue that everyone thinks that I'm good. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times they look like ones and sixes. So those were numbers that I had both gravitated towards and wondered, like, am I one? Am I six? When I finally figured it out, it like all clicked.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was like, first of all, I don't know that I've ever talked to another woman who has said out loud what you just said, which is something that I feel a lot, that whatever I'm doing, I'm very drawn towards life change. And so I've just started to like explore this a lot inside my own head and thought, you know, how would it be if I was a trash collector? Like if I was a garbage person, would I be able to like pursue mission the same way I do? What I've decided is I think that whatever job I'd be doing, I would decide that it was wildly important for life change.
Yeah.
So if I happened to be a barista, if that was like my particular skill set, I think every morning I would think like, this is a really important job because I am changing people's lives by giving them the coffee. Or if I was a trash collector, I think I'd be like the most passionate trash collector. And I'd say like, the whole world depends. I mean, and when I start thinking about it, I can pull the thread so quickly. I'm like, the whole world depends on the trash getting picked up. You can't keep going if the trash is just piling up. This is wildly important. I think I'd become like really, really even more passionate about recycling. And I've just started to think about all these different, like whatever I was working in, I would really want to find and continue increasing the amount of life change that was happening around me.
Yeah. And I think one of my favorite jobs was like right after college. I graduated from college a year early, which just sort of thrust me into the world, not knowing like what in the world I was going to do. And I didn't feel ready for it. And so I was waiting tables for like a season longer than my parents were happy with because they were like, we just helped you like with your college and like, what are you going to go do with it? But I loved it. And I think it was just that human interaction that can totally fire me up too. And so I think what you're saying is true, that I think life change happens in relationships. And so if there's a way that you can be with people, then you can be changing lives.
Yep. That is like a refrain in my head a lot. And it's interesting. I'm just noticing it in the last few years. And so, I mean, not noticing it. I think I'm just paying attention to this refrain going on in my head all the time of like, we get to change the world. We get to change the world. It's like what I wake up with. And so the reason why I asked about your Enneagram is because I relate that a lot to my Enneagram number being an 8. And so when I was listening to you, I was like, but if I had to guess, I would have guessed you were a 4.
Oh, it's funny. In 4, I just like am owning my 4-ness. Yeah. It's new to me, the 4, owning the 4 wing, but I definitely think it's really strong in how I do things.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. The other thing I want to like capture out of that, I told you before we started recording that I just happened to go on a walk with a college student this morning. We live in a college town, and so I spent a lot of time with college-age girls, and was walking with a gal this morning who was talking about what she was going to do after school. And I'm just constantly also reminded, because of the women I'm around, that there's this desire to figure out what you're going to do, and this, pressure to figure out what you're going to do. And I have lost so much of that because I love what I'm doing right now, but I certainly don't think I'll be doing it in 10 years in the same capacity or style that I'm doing it now. And I just find so much freedom in your story too. Like, does that feel freeing to you that you've gotten to work in so many different areas? What's that like?
Yeah, I loved it. It's just been cool to watch learnings from past experiences like pop up in what I'm doing now. And I've kind of thought my life would be more of like a straight line journey. And what I've seen it be is sort of a zigzag and lots of running after things and then having to recalibrate and reset and needing different things at different times. And I think that it feels full when I think about all the things I've gotten to do, and that it's just been cool to see sort of, even though they don't linearly build on one another, that I can use all that experience in what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Okay. So answer this. What does mission look like right now in this season? What does it look like for you to be on mission? What does that mean?
Well, I think that I've been in a season, we talked about this, we were together for a little bit in the fall. I think when I stepped out of ministry, in some ways, I kind of was feeling like I had taken myself out of a game, like, I don't maybe matter as much in that world. And I think I sort of put some of that on a shelf for a while. And I think now that I've been on site for a year and been back in Nashville for a year and a half, that like, I really see this year as we begin it as a season of like refinement and wanting to be really intentional in the relationships around me. I decided at the beginning of the year that I was going to take a 6-week break from social media. So I took all the apps off my phone, and I'll play like this Candy Crush like game sometimes when I'm watching television. I took that off, and I cleaned out my closet on January 1st and got rid of like 7 bags of crud that were just like excess and stuff that was probably giving me like ambient anxiety.
Yeah.
I think that it sort of feels like really refining and kind of pruning and cutting back. I think I have this really deep desire to know what is real and what is good in my life and in the world. And so the things that were muddling that, I just am trying to be like, have more clarity.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of the journey I'm in, the mission that I'm pursuing. I mean, obviously, I have lots of fun relationships here. One of the things I love about being in Nashville is, as a single woman in my early 40s, it's really been a refreshing community for me because I have a lot of friends that are married, that have kids, and are in all different stages of life that really invite me in well. And so life feels full relationally, and I love being able to pour into my friends and their kids, and work is full and crazy and trying to get replanted in a new church. And so
yeah,
all those things.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to say some things now that I think I said to you in September, and I'm going to say it again. And I want women to hear this because I think it's important for us all to hear. But I told you, and I genuinely firmly believe this, that I talk to so many people in this world of authors, speakers, online leaders who are so incredibly impacted by you. And not only because of what you've done in the past and like made spaces for them and spoken into them and called them up into leadership, but also because of how you are genuinely leading so against the grain and I mean that just like with the path of the world, like hurtling forward, not even that you're going against people, but just against the grain of like, so quick, so fast, so this, so that. So like even self-promotion, when we got to spend time together in New York, I mean, I have like extremely redolent memories of walking on the pavement and hearing you say things about self-promotion that just implanted in my heart in the best way and called me up. And so it's interesting that you even unpack that about being a 3 wing 4 who is counter personal achievement, because that's so lived out in the way that you're just impacting so many people. And I only see the tiniest sliver of it from just talking to people who are so inspired and spurred on by your depth and your pace and your intentionality. And so it's beautiful that mission right now in this season looks like cultivating that for you.
Oh, thank you. It's so kind. I feel the same way about you. I think it's like one of those things that I just can have a tendency to drift into things that don't fill me the way that I want to be filled. And so I just am trying to build the life I want.
Yeah.
And I think like one of the things, like being off social media for like on a weekend, I was telling a friend that like I realized that there is this loneliness that I feel. I think part of it singleness. I think part of it is everyone is feeling that way right now. But I think that instead of acknowledging it and trying to do things that would actually like feed it in a healthy way, I was just scrolling through Instagram, and it was probably leaving me with other feelings of either jealousy or of like needing to achieve more, not feeling like I wasn't enough. But like, I think that it's been really good even a weekend to be able to say, oh, but the thing that's under that is really like loneliness. And why am I lonely when I have so many people around? What am I doing wrong in my life that I have tons of friends? And, you know, like, how do I recalibrate that in a way that I'm working towards it in a way that would actually help it, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Let's pause there. I want to ask some questions because I think about this a lot. No, I'm really blessed. Would you be willing to say an example of something that makes you feel lonely? And I'll say one too, because I've been watching this in my heart. And then would you say an example of what eases that loneliness? Something that, you know, you should do that would, you know, comfort or bring peace where there is loneliness.
I think I can feel lonely when I am home and I like want to do something with someone, but I don't really have the motivation to call someone to go do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you just want someone to be there and to know what you want and need to do and to be there doing it with you.
Yeah.
And then I think I also sometimes feel lonely in a group of people. I think what I realize about both is that there are things I have control over. Sometimes I'll like feel lonely when I'm like out at dinner with girls and I'm not showing up in a way either because I'm feeling self-protective with the people that are around, like I need to be self-protective, or I'm just feeling guarded, or I have some other narrative happening in my story where I'm not fully showing up. So I'm not feeling fully known.
Yeah. Okay. And what's something that would bring comfort to loneliness, or that has?
For me, being in nature is one thing, whether it's like being on a hike with a friend or even being like a couple weeks ago, I went to Colorado with my parents. And so I skied by myself. And it's so funny. Skiing is like one of those activities that I love to do by myself. I love the nature and the fullness, and I just feel like God in the mountains, and I just feel really strong even being alone in that.
Yeah.
And so I think that doing things like that for me also are really bolstering. It's funny because I'm alone except with God.
Right.
But that there's something about doing things like that where I feel really strong and independent and connected to myself and to God that remove it for me too.
I am currently listening to Sacred Rhythms. Have you read that book?
No, but I've heard so many people talk about it. I need to read it.
Yeah, anytime I mention I read it, either someone's like, I've been meaning to read that, or I've already read it. It was life-changing. And there is a chapter on solitude, and I recently listened to it while I'm listening to the audiobook, and I listened to it while Christmas shopping at Target early one morning. It was the only time I had to get out at like 8 a.m. and get my kids a few things, and I put my earpods in and just quietly cried walking around Target listening to this chapter on solitude. And she shared a ton about loneliness and solitude, and her basic theory is that being around people makes us lonely, and that being with God is what meets it. And it's interesting. I'm an extreme introvert, I would say, who loves people, and I live in an extremely extroverted life. So to the point where I even have to a lot of times evaluate, like, am I an introvert? Because I do thrive in this very extroverted life. I'm with people most days from 6 a.m. until, my kids go to bed at 9. And so I sometimes am like, am I really an introvert? And then I remember, like, no, in my truest sense, I get energy from being alone. And that's where I'm remade into who God made me to be. So I've just been evaluating feelings of loneliness in my life and trying to capture them and notice them, because I wouldn't say off the bat that I feel lonely a lot because I'm with people so much.
Right.
So I'm just trying to notice, like, do I feel lonely? And I wanted to tell you something that made me feel lonely and how I responded to it.
Yeah.
Because you are aware of it. The last time we were together, you're really good friends with Carlos and Heather Whitaker. And I told you that I have a huge, like, internet appreciation for them. There's people you like online, and then there's people that you're like, I like, love them. Like, I carry them in my heart to God because of the internet. I just really appreciate them. I don't know Heather at all. You know, you can't follow her. She's private. But I want to. And if you guys don't follow Carlos Whitaker, he is not private. You can follow him. You absolutely should follow him and read his most recent book. It was really shifting and talks about onsite, which we talk about in a second. But he posted the other day, I don't know if you were already offline, but you probably heard about it in person, about the experience they had the other night at their church.
Oh, no, I haven't heard about it.
Okay, well.
I'm so disconnected from the world. It's hilarious. I don't even know what I'm missing.
Internet. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll tell you about it. And so you don't have to break your internet and you can go get the real deal story from your friends. But essentially just they got like called up in the middle of worship by their pastors by name to like come up and be prayed over. And I saw it, and I'm a big liker on Instagram. Let me say this. So a lot of people just scroll and look, but I appreciate the value of really like liking people's things. So I like a lot of posts. I don't like read and not like. If I see it, I'm going to like it. And I noticed very quickly in my heart, almost in the back of my mind, that I did not like the picture. And I just kept scrolling. And about an hour later, my husband, who also has a deep appreciation for Carlos and Heather from the internet, texted me and he said, "Did you see Carlos's post? That was so beautiful." And I said, "Yeah, I did. It was beautiful." And I went back and looked at it and I was like, I'm jealous. I'm lonely. I want someone to call me up like that. You know, I want that. And, you know, we're the leaders in our church. We're the pastors. There's very few moments where that happens. And I'm genuinely just quietly crying right now in my podcast closet. But I was reminded that this year I sat down and I just wrote down all of these moments where I'd just seen God or experienced God this year. And one of them was being in New York with you and a few other friends who just prayed for us. And it was actually the moment that made me start making the list, because I felt really just prompted by God to not call 2018 a hard year and a bad year. And I saw you in New York, and that was the first time you and I really had extended time together in the middle of just a really heartbreaking season for us, just really, really like bottom of the barrel. And the first night we were there, just like, I don't know what happened, but my recollection is that I ended like crumpled on the floor crying with a bunch of new-ish friends praying for us. And you were one of them. And I felt very not alone.
Yeah.
And
it was awesome.
Yeah, I felt very comforted. And so I just had to remind myself, like, this does happen for you. And what's more, when my husband texted me that, I went and liked Carlos's post and commented on it and just like affirmed, like, right, I'm glad you had that. I'm happy for you. I am happy for you. And then I texted my husband back and I said, I'm so glad we get to do that for people. I'm so glad. And that made me feel less lonely, to remember, like, this is what we get to do. This is what we get to do.
Yeah.
So it's
amazing.
That was tender. Thanks for going there. Hey friends, we're going to break right here for a second, and I want to just share something quickly with you. A theme for me this year, I sense God taking me back to Psalm 18 and this idea that he has brought me out to a spacious place. And I want to live under the belief that he's brought me out to a spacious place. One thing I love about our partnership with West Rock Coffee is that they want to provide a spacious place for their coffee growers. They want them to feel encouraged. They want them to feel equipped. They want them to be given the tools they need to live abundantly and also to do their jobs unto the glory of God and change the world while they're at it. West Rock Coffee believes in people, and not just the drive to survive, but to live with dignity and to achieve greatness and to experience abundance right where they are. You've heard me talk about West Rock, how I love how they partner with individual farmers and what they're doing in the world. But I just wanted to put that on the table today, that I think part of living a spacious life for me, part of living a life where I believe God can move and can do things and can grow and can shift me, is partnering with companies where I see the leaders of those companies doing the same thing, and not just for themselves, but for their employees and for their customers as well. That's why I love West Rock, because they are about abundance. They are about providing great opportunities, and they are down to change the world, one cup of coffee at a time. You can get West Rock Coffee on my favorite place, Amazon.com. Tell us about On-Site.
After I resigned from IF, I knew I was really kind of burnt and depleted leaving. And I'd had several friends that nudged me and were like, you should go to On-Site. This is an opportunity for you. You don't have a job lined up yet. You've got some time. And I sort of was like resistant. And it was something I'd always loved hearing people process their experience at one of the On-Site workshops. And every time I listened to someone talk about going, I felt so curious and so terrified and so certain that it was something I never wanted to do myself.
Yeah.
You know, like I wanted to be someone that was brave enough that would go and do that, but I just didn't feel that way. So I would say over the next couple of months, it literally kept coming up to a point where what I realized is my grief in leaving, I didn't know what to do with it. And I needed someone to help guide me through it and figure out how to do a better job of like processing my feelings. I'd never been like a huge counseling advocate either. I'd gone several times when I'd gotten stuck in different places in life and relationally. And I am just not a verbal processor. I am very filtered. I probably don't even know what I'm feeling some of the times. So it had always kind of felt draining. The idea of sitting down for an hour and sort of delving into a question and answer about my feelings, I just felt like I was a failure at that. Enter On-Site, it was so in my face, I couldn't kind of not go after a few months after I left IF. It just was like the best thing for me. I think the way that I've talked about it that makes the most sense to me is that it felt like I kind of had this wound that was oozing that people would say like, oh, I can see that you're oozing. And it was the first time in my life I hadn't been able to like control or mask any woundedness. So that made me really uncomfortable that people could see my feelings in that way and where I was.
Yeah.
What I felt like On-Site did was just help excavate the wound and bind it up properly. So it's not like that it didn't exist. It just helped it heal in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't healing in a healthy way.
Yeah.
All that to say, I did our Living Center program. I loved it. I told Miles a couple of months later, like I would clean up barns if they needed me to. I wanted to work there so bad. Yeah. So now it's really fun that I get to lead our marketing and business development team and sort of be on the other side of it.
I love it. Well, On-Site is in my view for 2020. My prayer was that I get to go for a week there and that my husband would get to go as well. And I'm just so thankful. Awesome. Everyone I know says the work is life-changing. It's just life-changing. So yeah. You're doing it.
Yeah.
You're doing like life-changing, catalytic, amazing, incredible work. And we're so thankful.
Yeah. Miles says a lot that, you know, no one needs it, but we all deserve it. And I think it's so true, just the opportunity to disconnect and come for 4 to 7 days. Our workshops like Barry and Link and really do kind of a deep dive on yourself and an inventory and like get reconnected to who God made you and who you want to be and sort of reignite the purpose in your life. And even for me, the community of people that I did Living Centered with, I learned grace from in a way that I had never felt it in like a church. And so it really even helped reframe some of that for me of like, it truly is a place where people kind of show up and dive into their brokenness and work on sort of mending it in a way that is so inspiring and courageous. So
I love that. Okay, I'm not going to ask you our silly questions to end because I just feel like this has been too good. I don't want to end on a silly note, but will you end like this? Will you tell me if you had been listening to a podcast maybe 5 or 6 years ago, what would have really blessed you to hear? What do you wish you would have heard and like taken to heart in the season, in a past season on mission?
So I have a friend here in Nashville that's an artist, and he's got this series of paintings that he's done. And I recently was at the Porter Flea Market at their holiday market where he was showcasing some of his art, and it's all these messages from God. And I bought 2 of them. So I think those are the 2 things that really just I deeply like always need to hear in my soul. And one is you're exactly where you need to be. And that's from God. And you're not who everyone says you are. Also from God. And just a reminder to be present where I am and not striving to be somewhere else. And a sense that my identity is shaped by God and not by other people. Those sort of messages, I think I'll need to hear for my whole life, 5 years ago and in 5 years and for the rest of my lifetime.
So good. All right. Hey, friends, will y'all stop and pray for Lindsey and just thank God for her? Thank him for her leadership and her wisdom and her vision. And would you just pray for these 6 weeks where she's drawing nearer to him? Would you pray for health and for life and for abundance and rest for her? Yeah. Thank you so much, Lindsey. Thank you for just taking the time and being honest and giving us a little bit of what's happening right now.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I loved it. Always good to catch up.
Yes.